reversed. Like this side is not here. It's like this. My brain doesn't work for that. My kids laugh at me all the time because I think
you can change it. We're live, by the way. I think you can change it. We are live. I think you can change it. Oops, I'm just going to knock over some stuff. I just realized my microphone is. I think you get. Hi, everybody. We're live when we're just chit chatting. I think you can change it so that you're reversed. But I don't actually know always how to do that. I think it's within.
I know I can do it with casting. I've seen that somewhere with Anyway, it's fine. Yeah. This is the Faith and Marissa improv show.
It absolutely 100% is. I just realized we're chit-chatting, but we're actually doing a podcast, and it is called Nourish the Risktakers, and I'm really excited today to have everybody listen in and see the incredible, the stellar, the phenomenal, the infamous Faith Clarke. I often find myself going, well, you know, Faith, and realizing that not everybody does know. I'm like, well, you should. And it just sort of feels like, you know, and I love seeing you pop up on various friends' feeds and seeing you everywhere because you are brilliant. You are one of my favorite people to talk to, just with your mind, but also as everyone always laughs, your commitment to consonants, your voice is a neurodivergent dream come true. I'm able to audio process all the words that you say. It's just like, oh boy. I know the first time I said that to you, I was like, you know what I really appreciate about you, Faith? And Faith's like, what? And
I'm leaning in.
Yeah. And I was like, your commitment to consonants. And I know that you were like, what? And I'm like, you hit the T and the P, and you follow through with the word. And it's actually a really interesting, because you're a storyteller and you love taking people through that. And so it's really important when, you know, we are telling stories that we do follow through with the thought. I was just saying, I often stop a thought and then start and put a thought in the middle of a thought, which isn't great for storytelling. It's entertaining in the moment, but afterwards, when you're going back and editing video, you're like, what was I doing?
Oh, where was I going?
Where was I going? But I love Faith because you are an incredible storyteller. So Faith, welcome to Nourish the Risktakers. This is the podcast where we do talk about asking for and receiving help. And I think this is an incredible opportunity, given your focus and as well your thesis you're going to tell us about today, where you are talking about culture and restorative culture. But Faith, give us a short intro of who you are and what you do in the world.
Oh boy. I have a story about the teas. I'm sure I've told you why I'm committed to teas, as in addition to being Jamaican. But I am a human that loves to pursue the connection, what happens in the magic connection between two people. I think that the thing, regardless of whether I'm teaching students in the classroom or at the college level, or if I'm having a conversation with a BFF, or if I'm watching a great movie, I am looking for that. There is electricity between two humans. And that magic is the place where change happens, where growth happens, where conflict happens, and we get to mine the conflict for wisdom if we choose, and so on. And in the present moment, I'm using that interest to help teams be more effective by being more focused on the superpowers that humans have. I think the business systems we've created have been cleverly designed to crush humans. I don't understand who thought this thing through, you know? So it's been designed to crush humans, and we don't capitalize on the power that makes humans. Humans have to thrive in spite of these systems. And I think, well, what kind of amazingness would we have if we actually leveraged the superpower that humans have? And a lot of that superpower is with human to human. And so we have to undo the damage of supremacist systems and colonization and other issues like that, and weave in nourishment, and weave in restoration, and weave in belonging and inclusion, not at the policy levels. That's important, yeah. But just between me and you, what does it mean for Faith and Marissa to belong with each other? And I think that's where it needs to be in the workplace, so that we can have, well, first of all, we can have amazing work, but we don't have to recover from work. Like this idea that humans go to work and then come home to recover is why are we living life this way? So
isn't it incredible that we have absolutely invented, made up, imagined a system that is literally killing people in order to try and survive. It is absolutely amazing to me every day when I look at this and go, well, that's just the way it is. And it's like, no, we actually created that. And it's also a system that we created relatively recently. Like when we look at our history of capitalism and colonialism, like we're not going back thousands and thousands of years. Like this system that we're currently operating in business is about 100 and some years, maybe 125 years old. Like that's not a lot.
And I mean, it's like ancestors are probably like 300-400 years old. Like, like if we go back 1,000 years, we could probably say, yeah, there was actually ways that people worked that weren't like this. That's there are actually ways that people were together with each other and created entire civilizations and times together that weren't like this.
Yeah. So we're like, okay, 10 generations ago, we weren't like this. So what happened? We know what happened. We know the power and control and classism were created in order to do this, but yet we still maintain it, and not for, not because we want it, just because it's just like, almost like we're just like, okay, now what? What's the next step? So, okay, first of all, I do have questions about why you were committed to the tea, but I want to also recognize that we have a short amount of time. So you're going to have to tell me that story later, but I'm going to table it and I'm going to remember that. So I want to talk about this idea of culture, because you and I will talk about this probably for hours and hours if you let us. But, when we look at creating teams, when we look at creating culture and community, what would you say is, like, if we could have one big step next, what could we do to decolonize and start creating this restorative culture that you talk about?
Yeah, I think a friend of mine said this to me. She said, every problem that you face, every single problem that you face is 80% a system problem. Every single one, 80%. So I'm like, really? I mean, my problem being late to work, I mean, my difficulty procrastinating, like all of them. And I think that if we could actually just admit that, let's just pretend that that's the case, then all of this focus on getting the right employee and having, their job description just perfect and figuring out how they should speak or not speak and all the things that we do that's focused on the individual, if we could just leave that alone for a second and say, what's the system? And when I think system, this is just me as a previous lifetime computer programmer, it's really not the mechanized system, but the environment. So I have this plant here that hopefully it will live. And I've realized that it's very dependent on the environment. It's very, it's not just about this plant. It's the room that it's in. It's whether I'm watering it or not, what's in the soil. We aren't paying attention to what's in the air, what's in the soil, what's in the environment. And teams and individuals work within a context, a dynamic context, that's the workplace and the team, and a broader context, that's the town, city, world that we live in. And all of that is having way more impact than whether we use Slack or Basecamp for productivity. You know what I mean? So if there was one thing I would say that we need to shift, it's leave that alone. What's the thing that we can do to cultivate an environment that productivity, if we want to use that, and goals are the byproduct? Instead of focusing on goals, if we focus on the environment, the goals will just show up versus eat your vegetables, eat your vegetables, eat your vegetables. We could just, nothing else is in the fridge but vegetables. And then we're all excited and kids eat their vegetables. And it just happens because they're hungry and they'll eat their vegetables, right? What are the environments that we're creating that lean into the passions, desires, and needs that humans have that make us automatically show up and create the things that we've created across millennia? I'm sorry, I don't know if that was a one thing. That was a very big thing. But focus on the system, focus on the environment, let go of the micro in terms of systems. Yeah.
Yeah, I think when we look at things like anxiety and stress and these impacts on our body, on our minds, and I look at the things that we do, it's like, why are we not looking at the environment? Why are we not looking at the things around us? And I think I think we think it's like big things all the time, but it actually could be very little things. And we've talked about this accessibility. Like it could be that your chair makes you physically uncomfortable. And so what happens is you've now held yourself in a position for 8 hours as you're working, and it is causing shifts and imbalance in your body, which is causing unease. And I think we don't talk about and you're like, I don't know why when I get to work, I hate coming to work. I hate ground. Well, actually, the chair you sit in is causing your body and your mind unease. And you don't know, like it's translating into other things, right? And then you think, wow, that one thing is causing, it could
absolutely
compounded with a bunch of other things.
The thing too is that only certain people have the privilege of having comfortable environments, right? So the whoever gets the comfy chair, gets the office with the light that comes in, so that person gets some sunlight or whatever it is. And then because of this implicit value hierarchy that we still support and maintain in many of our workplaces, people that are quote unquote lower value are supposed to toughen up and endure. So we know, why would I complain about my chair? I know that would jeopardize my financial and job security, right? So I'm just like, I'll sit upright. And then over time, even though it's a small thing, it's wearing away until, the vagus nerve just says, okay, forget it, fight and flight. We can't rest and restore anymore because you've been coping with this for such a long time.
Yeah. And that's a physical, we've said the chair is a physical thing, but then that goes with how you communicate with each other, how you solve problems together. Right. And it's like, it could be the most minute, thing that wears away. Right. I always think about water. I'm obsessed with rocks and striations, and you go through the mountains and you can see all of the different eras. But I look at it and I go, I always think, oh, it's so amazing how water has the ability to wear away stone, and it can be the littlest drip. Just this one little drip over time will make this ginormous well. Right. Yeah. And I think about this in terms of how we build our relationships with other people is that little drip, right? It could be a rushing tide coming at us. Absolutely. We have those moments in our businesses, whether we're a small business owner or we have a team or we're in a corporation. We always think about the glacier and the tide, right? We don't think about these little tiny drips that can come in. And that can start with our communication styles. It can come with the way we work.
The thing is that in that thing between two people, if we can it's almost like turn up our noticing for the drip. Like, okay, so Marissa, you and I were just talking about this thing and I felt some kind of way. Of course, we need to have agreements between us that it's okay for me to say I felt this some kind of way. And we need to have some kind of context where it's safe. Like I can, we can have this conversation. I felt this kind of way and it may not be about you, but this was my thing. And then we have an agreement of mutual care. Like you care about the way that I feel. You're not going to change who you are, but like there is this thing between us that often can't be defined. And when we are attending in the micro to those things, maybe I need some self-soothing. So even in telling you, I need to kind of just pay attention to some tactile, maybe that will help me get grounded. And then my wiser self will notice what's going on here. Oh my goodness, it's the air quality. Whatever it is, if we're paying attention to it in our interactions between two people and we build the muscles to pay attention to it here, and then a third person is added and we weave them in. People often ask me, this stuff you talk about, is it scalable? I'm like, it's scalable on the micro because I can build my capacity to be with another person and then expand that to being with three people and three people being attentive to the nuance of each other and keep expanding that. That's possible. If we could do that, then we would notice all kinds of things, including, whether we should be using my favorite beating stick, Slack. It's not.
I hate Slack.
I haven't enjoyed it really much, but
there's something about it. I actually hired a company, a social media company, and I thought it was gonna be great, but everything they did was in Slack, and I had to say, I will never go into Slack. Like I was very trying to be as joyful as possible, but it was like, I appreciate that these are the tools that you love. I will never use them. And so therefore we can't work together, and that's okay. Like it was, and I don't expect them to like come up with a whole different tool to use. It was just like, I'm okay letting this relationship, thank you so much. You're amazing people, but I will never communicate with you. And it was something that I think I felt good about doing, because it's like, otherwise I'm paying a bill that I'm never actually going to be using. But it's one of those things where I think we settle for tools just because it's the only thing we have.
Right. And I think even with the use of tools, if we can, earlier you commented about, the systems of communication when we're talking by text. And I wonder, what about understanding the system between us? And if 6 of us are here and 3 understand Slack and 2 don't, that's fine. What's the system of communication among us so that that's okay? That there's stuff in Slack, but somebody's texting me. Like, humans automatically morph and adjust their communication between each other, but somehow in a corporate space, that's not the way it's supposed to be. Like, if we could just use our wisdom, then somebody is giving somebody else the information in the form that they can take it in and translating that. We do that all the time. And so I just wonder, like, we don't have to say, okay, no, we can't use Slack. What's the one tool that serves all 500 people? I feel like that's the wrong question.
That's right.
How do we together get this work done? And if we can actually just engage and notice our rhythms and be in sync with each other, then we're like, oh, okay. So when that shows up in Slack and we text this one, and then, or somebody yells across, or, whatever it is that we do, that works for the actual humans on the ground. I love it when people ask me, how do we blah, blah, blah. It's like, what do the actual humans, the ones that are being affected by this in this specific context, say would work for them?
Yeah, it's really interesting in the catalyst. So people want to message me directly, which I think is completely a legit want. They want to be able to communicate with me or the team. And we struggled because we were using a tool that had like a forum, and then people were using it. They had to sign into another tool. It just wasn't working. And I figured out how to put a chat bot right into the main co-working room. You wouldn't believe how many messages I'm getting. And people are like, oh, this is great. Like, it is so fantastic to see. And I didn't have to teach anybody. Like, it was one of those things where it was just like natural. Like, they're just like, oh, I'm going to type, see what this is. And it worked. And then they got a response back. And then, you know what I mean? And it's interesting because now we're able to expand on it, and we're using the feedback from people like, oh, I like when it does this. I like when it, and then I'm like, what if we did this? And it's a together process.
Yes. Right? Yes.
I tried it. I put it out into the world. I gave them really no direction because I wanted to see what would happen.
What people did with it. Yeah.
Now we can create actual how to, and there's like a knowledge base and stuff we can build in there. But it's been really interesting to hear the feedback and how people have been responding to it. And they're like, oh, it's just like I can talk to you directly. And it allows us to actually share information really easily across the team. So if they work with me and then they work with another team member, we can share that information so that people don't have to start over. It was just, it was like it took me 5 minutes, Faith, to put this thing in that was something that was bothering us and not working for a year. Right. Yeah. But it took listening. It took kind of saying, okay, what is the actual problem here? Yeah. What is causing the barrier to communication? And then what also works for me as a person, because I'm receiving the communication. So not all messenger bots or they're not all created equal. And it had to work with my ability to respond and get messages and get alerts. Yeah. And it was, it was interesting to see the process, but it took a year. I'm going to admit it.
I mean, it took a year of like being with the discomfort of that thing and kind of looking at it. I always say that the first step is always, let's move closer. Like just get in a little bit more into the discomfort so we can say, what is going on here? And of course, that means being in a context where getting closer doesn't cause backlash. And so you moved in closer, and then there was this inspiration that you got that aligned with who you are. And then people kind of dived. Like, I think that that's the way most systems emerge. And I think what we've done is that systems emerged that way, and then we grab them and try to apply them to other contexts.
Yes.
where we have to really be present with where we are and observe what's emerging. And then, if necessary, automate that. So people are like, I love automation. Can I automate the? I was like, I don't even know what the thing is that I need to automate yet. I don't know.
Yeah.
I know that when I try to use your tool, it's trying to teach me new skills that I don't want to do those things.
Yes.
So I have to pay attention to the rhythm of work, of my working together.
Yeah.
And then maybe there's a tool that I can use, or a couple of tools or whatever.
It's interesting too, because we do a lot of things on automation in ourselves. Like we just have this manual, like the muscle memory of doing things, right? So sometimes what we think we need in order to make it easier isn't actually what we need, because we've automated something already in our mind. We've compensated. And I'm not saying that automation might be good. We've figured out a fix to move ourselves around it. So like it's out of our brain now. Our brain thinks, oh, we fixed that. But it's actually that there's an easier way that we could be doing it. That doesn't mean we have to do the MacGyver, the workaround to do it. But we don't have always the ability to identify that in the moment, and until you're working together with somebody and they go, oh, actually that's a problem. Like that causes you 5 extra steps, and you're just like, really? It does, but because you have put it out of your mind as being fixed.
Yeah. Like I'm used to walking around. I trip on this piece of furniture and I walk around it. I trip and I was okay, someone just walk around it. And somebody watching was like, I noticed that you walk around this thing. And then the most delicious words, why don't I move this for you? Why don't I help you move? Like, I'm like, one, I was ignoring it so much that I didn't even think about. But 2, when you say I should move it, then I'm like, no, I have figured out the walking around it.
Yes.
So people that reflecting to me in team, reflecting each other, and then they called it, like in the technical language, or somebody said, these backup behaviors. When you look at the situation, it's like, it's not working, even though that's not my quote unquote job. I know what could be done to help that, and I offer that into the space. That's part of designing the culture, a culture where people are like, I feel free to offer into the space what's needed to make all our collective dreams come true.
And in terms of the podcast topic, Nourishing the Risk Taker, that to me, you've just embodied that, because we do automation. We do in our brain. We make workarounds. To have someone else come in and say, can I move this for you? Or can I, that's receiving support, which is just as important as being able to ask for it. It's the safety, as you said, to be able to offer support, or to offer, an observation or a content into that culture.
Yeah. It's risky. I've noticed, I think you and I talked about this some time back. It's risky to be in a context like that, and yet to have the context not be fully committed to that nourishment, because then you've just begun to be that person who's willing to say, hey, I'm gonna offer this, I'm gonna move that, or what do you think about this? And then any one of us revert to our, pre-liberated state, or revert to our supremacist thinking, or whatever it is. And then the trust is broken, because one of the things that makes that nourishment work is trust. Like, we have to have these agreements between us that, we're prioritizing this nourishment. This is what we're doing. And so it is risky. I like Nourishing the Risk Taker, because the risk taker isn't just out there creating stuff in the world. Being part of restorative culture is risky, because we all have the wounds of those other places that stripped us down.
Absolutely. So, and I think, when we're talking about corporations or businesses, businesses with bigger teams, but this is showing up in your community. This is showing up in your family as well, right? These are risks that we take of being a contributing member of something, of a culture. We risk being isolated or kicked out of all of these kind of relationships, these interpersonal experiences that we have with every day we do this.
A couple of days ago, it was my birthday, and my daughter was having this entire thing about wanting to make it special, and because of wanting to make it special, anxiety and other things, and so there was a whole lot of judgment, and we had a really powerful conversation about how we were both feeling. because of the wanting to make it special, had me wanting to help her not feel bad. And therefore, there was a whole messiness involved. And then we had this conversation that wasn't about fixing, but we heard each other and expressed how we felt and then reflected on that. It's like, isn't it amazing that we can do that? And isn't that the skill we want to build? Not the skill of making everyone comfortable all the time, but just the skill of noticing and expressing and then being with each other in the middle of the yuckiness. I think if we were less afraid of that, we would have more nourishment, because we're like, this is the jam, right? We weren't excited, but we're like, this is what we do. We just like, we're going to be in this and we're going to hear each other. Like, yeah, I prefer to do that than to have had a productive birthday celebration where everybody did what I wanted. And, so.
Yeah. And sometimes it's interesting. This morning we were in the Catalyst workroom, and sometimes like microphones pick, like it's all of a sudden things get really loud. Like, you change the channel on the TV, you're like, whoa, why is it so loud all of a sudden? Well, in the workroom, sometimes like all of a sudden the microphone picks up this really loud. Anyways, I was grumbling. Somebody had walked away and a vehicle had come by and it was so loud. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I can mic that person though. Like we have the power of doing that. And we kind of work in the, like there's no, it's not a personal attack if someone turns off your microphone. It's just that there's something going on in that moment and it's caused, right? Anyway, so I was like kind of just grumbling. I'm like, I can't believe that microphone just picked up that. And I was just mumbling to myself. Like I was just having a moment where I was just couldn't figure out technology. Anyways, that person came back in and they were like, oh, I was mic'd. I'm like, oh yeah, it was just really loud all of a sudden. And in that moment, I was trying to explain like how like all of a sudden, and they turned off their microphone. And I'm like, what's happening? Like now we don't have a conversation. And they were like, well, it's just really loud over here. I'm like, no. It was like that, just that one moment, it was just one moment. I'm like, I don't want you to change your entire behavior or the way that you interact and work in this room because of this one moment when we just had to mic this. But that's a conversation, right? And if we don't have that conversation, that person has now said, I've got to keep my microphone off in between every time because it's too loud here, right? Versus that one moment when a truck went by. These are these conversations we need to be able to have to be safe to have.
And it goes back to, again, in the work context, because I don't think we do this at home. But in the work context, we believe that we're always extrapolating for the permanent system. So instead of kind of being nuanced in the moment, this is what this moment needs, and we just respond to it. We're like, I want to make sure I don't get punished. I want to make sure I'm not wrong. I want to make sure I know whatever it is I'm supposed to know to behave or whatever it is. And so we extrapolate that out and say, okay, this is how I need to be. Somebody was saying, I was doing a professional development day recently, and the person was saying that they wanted feedback about, when they cross a line or whatever, because, neurodistinct, neurovariants, and they were like, I may miss certain cues. And in the saying of it, this person was describing it as there's a hard line that I may not know about. And I was like, maybe, but there might also just be in this moment, not a rule for you to follow ever all, but just in this moment, this person needs this thing. And then that's all. And we respond to that. And I think it's back to this, interpersonal agility. Because those systems tried to make us into robots, and we've taken that in, this interpersonal agility is like, let's respond to the moment. Like, okay, the guy's mowing the lawn. No, not every time Faith is on is the person mowing the lawn, but sometimes, and then you mute Faith if you happen to hear her son, but it's not all the time. It's this responsiveness that our bodies already know how to do in the world, that we actually know how to do with each other, that we need to be just bringing into our spaces of work.
I love that term, interpersonal agility. I think you're absolutely right. I think you should probably go trademark it, because I think you're onto something here, Faith, because I think we take in this, it's like, okay, this is the way it happened once, that's the rule. Now and now we've adjusted ourselves, just like we did in the chair, or just like we did in the, the drip. But it's not always going to be like that. It's just in that one moment. I try to explain to people in terms of, so I have like some scent sensitivities and some sound sensitivities. And it is most often completely related to how much sleep I've had. If I had a really bad sleep the night before, everything is going to hurt just a little bit more the next day. And I try to explain that both in my home and in my, my relationships, my community, and the work, of course, that I do. But I find myself trying to say, you just need to know that in this one moment, this is too loud, or in this one moment, it's too much for me. I don't want you to change your entire being. I'm just going to adjust myself in this moment, or I'm just going to adjust one thing in our environment that allows me to still be here with you in this moment. But I'm used to doing that. And I don't think that's a skill that we have been taught, because I didn't have it 10, 20 years ago. I didn't have it at all. It's in the last few years I've started to, because I'm working so closely with people and building communities, that I've started to being very, because I see them adjusting themselves, and I don't want them, because now they're uncomfortable, right? So now we've broken the inclusivity, because it's been about me and my needs, and their needs aren't being taken into account. So how can we have more of these conversations? Oh yeah, you have something. Go ahead.
Well, so I was just thinking about, my kids are huggers, as am I. So we're constantly, and then we give medicine with hugs. So we're like, all the 20 seconds, we're like committed, right? But not all the time is that physical hug. Like, I'm about to go to sleep and my son comes in for the hug. So then I'm trying to hug him. He's half on me. And my shoulder isn't right. And it's fine. Like, I can say, I can be uncomfortable for as long as I choose to be uncomfortable, as I am offering him and receiving from him the thing I want. And then the moment I've said it's not, I'm like, okay, that's not working. You need to move this way. I'll move this way. And we're constantly in that thing. Like, we are also afraid of discomfort, and we're afraid of the discomfort other people have in their lives because of being with us, right? So we're constantly like, I don't want Marissa to be uncomfortable, so I'm going to be, whereas I think we all have discomfort, shoes and stuff. There's all kinds of discomfort in our lives that we choose. So what about us all just being responsible for the dance that we have between each other, whether there is discomfort or not, and knowing that we can choose to step away from that at any point, versus let's do the thing that makes us all the most comfortable.
And someone else's needs in that moment isn't a personal attack on who we are, just because they've communicated those needs to us in that moment. One of the cultures that we have in the Catalyst, people say, like, what's the rule here? What's the culture? And I said, like, the base rule is we're not cooking fish in the community microwave, in the community kitchen microwave. And everybody laughs, because I feel like it doesn't matter if you've worked a long time in court. It is a common experience where someone has brought the most delicious leftovers to them, and now the entire office has to experience it for the next 3 or 4 hours, right? But the thing is, we might all love salmon at that one. We love salmon, but in that moment, we don't want to smell it for 3 hours in the office while we're trying to have meetings and focus and communicate. And so that's where I always say, like, but at any given time, we might share an amazing salmon meal together. At some point, we might have that and I use that as a metaphor, but everybody understands. They're like, aha, right? I'm like, so if someone comes to you and says, you're cooking some fish in the community microwave, we're not insulting the salmon dish. It's perfect. It's beautiful. You spent hours doing it. It's in that moment, it is impacting people around you. What can we do to do that? And so it becomes a conversation, and it's not a personal insult on the salmon.
Right.
Beautiful salmon.
And yeah, opening these conversations up, I think this salmon analogy is a clue inward. How do we have these conversations? Well, we have language and we have agreements. So I have I like the disc profile a lot. And on my profile, as much as I resist it, I'm apparently a high D. I used to think that, who likes D's? No one likes D's. I couldn't be a D. I must be and I gave myself another.
For people who don't know what the disc profile is, can you please explain the D? Because the D means a lot of things in many different contexts.
Yeah, well, as I'm describing, disc just has a breakdown of people according to whether they're fast or slow paced, and whether they're task or people oriented. And the D's are the fast-paced, high-task people. And so according to the person who was teaching me, apparently was not a D or didn't like D's, because it was like, these were the assholes, I'm sorry. These were the people who, just people hated. And I was like, that's not me. I'm a people person, So what I've noticed though, so when I have a partner that I collaborate with, and we understand the language of DISC. And so I do know that when deadlines are approaching and when the stakes go up, I switch into the fast-paced task person. I'm like, okay, I trust myself to repair the relationships afterwards. And I'm not trying to damage relationships, but I am like, do we have enough currency between us for me to just kind of like chop. And I'll just say to her, hey, listen, I'm switching into my D. And that opens the door for a conversation. She's also a D. And so, okay, I know what's happening here. Faith isn't just taking control. Faith isn't just whatever it is, but Faith is feeling the tension of the time approaching. And so then we could actually have a conversation about my anxiety, or she just gives me the room. Sure, have at it. Do the thing that feels like relief to you, because I know that you aren't just taking control of, and I know that you'll improvise if needed. I think that communities need shared language and shared agreements that make sense to them, that can open the door to the various conversations. Like me saying, hey, I'm switching into my D, and my friend saying, hey, wait, are you switching into your D? Because that's not no. And or whatever it is. Are you, cooking the salmon in the microwave? It feels that way to me, because honestly, what is salmon to you might just be like jerk chicken to me. And like the jerk chicken can be in the microwave, but the salmon can't. And that nuance in diverse community isn't often clear. But when we have language, then we can say, hey, this is what this feels like to me. And then we can go into the conversations about it.
And I love that we often have conversations in the neurodivergent world, and I say the neurovariant world, where the jerk chicken versus the salmon. So if I'm trying to communicate to you about my salmon and you're like, oh, that's like jerk chicken. And I go, no, that's not, or yes, it is. Of course, that's our way. I say our way, but like, it's the neurovariant way of like being like, I relate. I don't know. I've never had salmon and I don't know what salmon smells like, but I feel like it's like that time when someone cooked jerk chicken and I could not handle any, and it's like, yes, that is the exact same moment. And now we have a connection based on that. You didn't try to center the conversation. You didn't try to take away from my experience. You've just said, here are the tools that I have. Here's the experiences that I have. Is this the same thing as what you're saying, so that I can register that in my body? And there are some people who get very offended that you tried to talk about jerk chicken when they're in their moment about salmon.
Yeah, no. And that was hard for me because I used to, when I'm telling you one of my stories, it's me kind of grounding your story. For me, it's like me giving myself that understanding so that I can like understand you and the wisdom you're offering. And then people like, it's not about you. I was like, well, the conversation has to be about both of us. And this whole idea that we pause ourselves and block ourselves, and what's that, bracket ourselves to fully hear you. I'm like, I can't hear Marissa without bringing me into the thing, because what I hear from you is this juiciness between us. It can't be just you.
It's a choice of having a conversation versus a monologue, right? And I think this is something that comes up in no matter what the business size is being able to say, at this moment in time, I just want to monologue.
Yep.
Okay. At this time, I want to have a conversation. Oh, amazing. And now we have an agreement of what's happening. Right. And that's good to start off with that, and to be able to say, and maybe you don't know in the moment, but it's like getting into the habit of being like, at this moment, these are the needs I have. I mean, sometimes people come at you, you're like, wait, what are we doing here? Are we doing monologue? Are we doing conversation? What are we doing? I say sometimes too, people will come into the catalyst and I'll say, do you just need us to hear, or do you need us to help fix? Like, what are we doing? Because we're going to take different parts out of that experience. And I like that some people come in and say, I need you to hear right now, but tomorrow I probably will need you to fix. And I was like, excellent, because now I can make notes for myself that don't, go do all the things. And I'm like, right. I'm there. And then, but I'm like also making notes. And then the next time they come in, they're like, okay, now let's do the fix. excellent. Now and then like, that's you moving into the demo. Like, it's like, now I'm moving into this
I have a
mode.
list.
I've created my agility and I'm ready. I'm in the moment. Okay, let's do this. Right. But it's like being able to communicate even that back and forth, because
So
it
you
can
have
be
some
confusing.
language. You had, what did you say? Is it monologue or whatever it was? So that's language specific to you and the people who interact with you. I have a friend who says, how am I listening to you? And this is when she's doing work both with clients and her team, it's how am I listening? And then they have some bunches of ways that this is a type of listening I want from you. And for me with my kids, I'm like, I feel like I should be fixing. And then like my son would be like, I'm just expressing my emotion. And even on the inside, I enough expressing emotion. Okay, Faith, no, that's your problem. It's like, let me hear you express these emotions. And then sometimes I just say, again, shared language. Sometimes I'll just say, okay, I'm going to speak for 2 minutes. I just have things to say. Is that all right? And I was like, okay, I disagree. I think when we have these agreements, then we have the space to be all the ways that we can show up. And then people can set boundaries and say, no, I don't want you to monologue for 2 minutes right now. But you could send me an email with that monologue and then I could read it later. Or you could send me a video with that monologue and I could read it later. I don't want you to lose your thought, because like me, I'm going to lose my thought. I'm ready to monologue now. But it's like, I can record that and send it to you when you are able to take that in.
Yeah, I love that. I love being able to tell people, like, can you just voice note it? I can't listen to it right now, but I promise you I will listen to it later. Yeah. And I think this is because we deal in a world where there's like RSD, rejection sensitive dysphoria, is really high. Like, it's wow. And I think sometimes it's like people like, do you have 2 minutes to talk? And it's like, no, I don't. I hate doing that to people because I know that in that moment they're feeling some things. So I love being able to say, I'm just in the middle. I'm about to marry people. I often say, people actually do this a lot. They're like, can I just talk to you? I'm about to marry people. And they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm like, no. It's going to take about 10 to 12 minutes. If you would like to just send me a voice note, I'll listen to it. And then I can come back and be active in that conversation as soon as I'm done marrying people. And people are like, wait, what? And I think like being able to take in that information as well and letting people be available for you is a skill, and it's a habit we have to like work on, because I think we go out, we ask for help, and then if we can't have it right then and there, we feel like we can't ever ask for help again.
Yeah. But it takes so much courage to ask for help, right? So then we're not like, you feel like an annoyance if you're going to ask again. And so I do have that habit to say, I can't do this now, but I can do it later. And I think that's a part of the agility, the interpersonal agility that we want to build with each other, to mutually be responsible for the comeback. So we've come together and I'm like, okay, the mismatch right here, right now, for the moment. Then who's responsible for coming back? Both of us. And so it's not anybody feeling like a burden or anything like that. So I'm like, hey, an hour ago, 6 hours ago, you said, yesterday. So like every time I text you and say, hey, that video, Marissa, I feel some kind of way. And then I know that that's my work, because I know that you are like, no, you don't feel any kind of way. And you're just like, oh, great. Yeah, that's true.
Let me just, thank you. I have to do it. Yeah. I have to do it in the moment. Actually, I it's like funny. I've actually scheduled it into my calendar for this week because I realized that, like, so I tend to do things in the moment, and it sometimes surprises people. Like, they'll be like, I need a brand. I'm like, here you go. Here's a brand. And they're like, wait, what? I'm like, I just got to do it right now. Like, if I don't do it right now, it's not going to get done. And I know that about myself, right? But part of the time is I'll say to somebody, like, if I can't do it in that moment, I need you to ask me. And I've done this to people, and they're like, so weird. Like, can you ask me next Wednesday at about 2:00 for that thing? And they're like, well, I don't want to bother you. I'm like, oh no, I'm going to do it in that moment. But you're
offering me a gift when you kind of land in the moment with me, when maybe I'll be available and maybe I won't, but maybe I will. And you're just right there. Yeah.
And that's where I found, like, for me, for the Catalyst, it works really well for me to be in those rooms all day. People are like, how do you sit in a room, for 8 to 10 hours a day? And I'm like, well, first of all, I nap throughout the day. But two, I'm also doing other things. Like it's great. Body doubling is amazing for me, because I can go and, like, I'll water the plants, or I'll replant a pot, or I'll clean up the house. There's so many things that I do. But I love the drop in, and because we can do the work right there and I don't owe anybody anything. As soon as I owe somebody, it will never, ever get done. And that is something I had to acknowledge about myself and acknowledge that in my business to know what I was able to do. And once I was able to acknowledge that about myself, my own work style, game changer, right?
Because then you can share that. Like you can create language around the sharing of that. And then the people who know you, then I know it's just my stuff when I feel some kind of way. And then I can say, hey, because what I'm offering, Marie says, here's a moment that we can share. I'm going to drop into the catalyst. And you're like, great. If you drop into the catalyst, then we'll just work it out.
Yeah. And I think, but it takes that person, they have to be able to do that on their end too, right? It doesn't work for some people. Some people want to drop a comment and then come back a few hours later, or they want to say, can you make me this? And then it just magically appears. And I'm not the provider for them for that. Yeah. So then once we know that, it becomes really easy because it's okay to not have to work with everybody. It's okay to not have to, you know, we get to choose who we want to work with and who, because that style, somebody else wants to do DIY or done with you or done for you, DFI. Somebody wants to do that. That's their style of work. They don't want to do in the moment. They want to think about it for a while. They want to pause. They want to they want to be influenced by a bunch of different sources, or they want to do it on their own timeline. And that is great because then they find the people that work for them. Now, that doesn't always work in corporates because we can't just choose different team members. Be like, your style doesn't work for me.
I think on a team though, it's back to this agility, right? Because expecting people to be boxes that just plug into cables and then do other, that's not how it is. So if you're on the team and you're a done for you type of person, you have to go into your cave and ruminate on the thing. And I'm a done in the moment kind of person. There's a great opportunity for the conversation about where that intersects and how that intersects. And we want the job description and the workflow to just work. Whereas I'm saying, well, let's talk about this now. So what time of day do you like to go into the cave? Is that 2 a.m? Is that 5 p.m? Because I'm like, I find that I need to be talking to someone around about 3. You can talk to me. You just can't work while you're talking to me. But I can work while I'm talking to you. Great. So what if we work? I work, you talk, you listen, we actually have the ability to figure out how to work together, even with our varying styles of work, within the constraints of getting the job done by, the launch is whatever date. And then we figure this out. But we have this because the people have made the meeting so horrendous. We're so against being in meetings with each other because we've done it so poorly. We don't have the context to figure this out. So, and like, where are we going to figure out how to get together if it's not in a meeting? So I actually believe that we need to, just revolutionize meetings. Absolutely. So that the actual things that are happening is this interpersonal stuff. And then people can be about the execution of the actual work.
I think it was interesting when we had the panorama happening where people were working from home because they were actually in meetings and doing work, or they were just in the they got to actually pick their style, right? Because half the time, if I'm on a Zoom meeting, you don't know that I'm also writing a report. When we're in the Catalyst, people are telling me stuff, and then I write out, I'm like, okay, here's your three paragraph, content for your website. And they're like, you just did that? I'm like, well, yeah, you were talking to me and I did it while we were talking, right? That's my style. Your style was just, you needed to monologue for a bit. While you were monologuing, I was doing all of this kind of stuff. And now we've worked together, right? Because we don't have necessarily these visual cues whereas in a meeting, when I was in corporate, if I brought in my laptop to be in a meeting and to do work while people were talking to me, I will 100% guarantee you I would have gotten written up. I would have had, because I was not paying attention or I was not present in the meeting, where I was actually very present. I can't be present when I'm not doing anything. I often would come in and say, I'm going to doodle. I know that's going to bother some of you and make it uncomfortable, but that is the way that I can actually focus on the conversation. And I did bother people. And I'm like, that's you. If you would like me to not be present, I can do the visual representations that mean something to you, but I will not be able to work as well.
Yeah.
That's a risk. I paid for it. There's a reason why I no longer work in corporate, because I got to the point where I was tired of being able to say, here's how I can work really best for you. and then them saying, no, that doesn't work. And I'm like, then I can't be as productive as you want. I can't produce. I can't be as creative as you want me to be. And that's going to kill me inside. That's going to, because I like to be the most. I like to do everything just a little over the top, but I can't do it unless I have
the ability the most
to do it. Yeah.
And
yeah, go ahead.
That's the thing that we need to attend to as business owners. And a lot of us in this space are, running small businesses. We know that we have to know that that's the legacy we've inherited. So we're doing something revolutionary and different. And that means being aware that if we're bringing together a diverse team, we don't want people to mask. We do want maximum productivity. We need to be willing to figure out what that looks like for us and our team, or a strange family, our equivalent of what show was that when I was a kid? Was it the Munsters? Or, where you have this person, that person, no one looks the same, but yet somehow there is synergy. And we all can find that synergy within our teams, but we haven't practiced that, because for sure corporate didn't practice it. I was thinking about a teaching team that I have supported, and there's this one person that must be in multiple games, and or crafting. So either in games or crafting or both, while engaging in the conversation. And we all know. And I think that, can we allow ourselves to be seen enough in the ways that we are, so that I don't have a story about this person and what they're doing, except for, I'm so proud of you for doing what you need to do to be the most productive you can be for our shared mission. Because shouldn't that be the point? This is our shared mission. We're changing the world in this way. And you want to show up as your best self. So you're pacing. Isn't that wonderful? And your pacing is dysregulating me. So I'm doing something to help myself so I can be and share the space with you. Isn't that amazing that we're willing to do this with each other so that we can get this mission to happen, versus you're not professional? Like, so annoying. So
it is annoying. We need to really drop some of these. I remember once I might have told you this before, but I was in a Facebook group, and I was looking for actually a filter or an app to help me create a video look. And I uploaded a video. I said, I want it to look like this, but I can't use this app. And someone commented and said, it would be really, like, you don't make eye contact with the video, and it makes you look not confident. And I was like, well, that's a you problem. I'm actually very confident. I'm never going to make eye contact with a video, and my eyes are going to wander everywhere. Plus I have there's so many physical things, but then I'm also autistic. I'm never going to do this. Your assumption that I'm not confident, instead of listening to my voice and listening to my words and listening to my knowledge, you chose one thing that makes you uncomfortable. And you have now created an assumption about me. Never mind the fact that I didn't ask for tips on how to be confident. So now you've also gone into this area where you've not even listened to what I've needed. And I went on, it was like, and she was just like, well, and I'm like, and and I'm just like, not today. We're not doing this today. And it's those kind of things where we have determined how people should behave in order to fit these, again, made up. These are made up constructs.
Yeah.
Make eye contact. What? I remember as a child hearing that, I did public speaking. I did Toastmasters, and I was like, make eye contact with the person you're talking. I'm like, that's never going to happen. They're going to have to figure out other ways to know that I'm engaged in that conversation, to know that eye contact is never happening.
I remember having the conversation with my kids. I'd be like, okay, I know looking in the eyes might be hard. Try the ears. But it was, because we live in this world where we want to be creating these spaces where we understand more broadly than the linear rules. And at the same time, we're in this space that's like this. And so, how do we support each other? The high schoolers that are graduating right now that are going to move from school that is, even though school is not super supportive, it's probably more supportive than the workspaces or the college spaces that they're going into. And I've always struggled with, let's burn the whole system down, versus how do we be part of the system and take what we need and still get the nourishment. And the dissonance is rough. Yeah, because I'm like, look at the ears, then drop your eyes and look at the other ear. Because people have these rules.
Well, and I read lips. Like I rely almost 100% on reading lips, which has been, of course, a challenge with masks over the. I'm like, what? I have no. I'm going to write this down. Can you write this down? Because I've got nothing. I always like tell this tale during. We went to a farmer's market and my husband was like, why do you have like 4 loaves of bread? I'm like, I thought he was asking me if I wanted this loaf. I didn't realize he was asking me if I wanted 3 other loaves of this kind. And he's just like,
you felt bad to hand them back.
He had a mask. I couldn't hear anything because it was so loud, everything. And he's just like, I'm going to get the bread from now on. I'm like, amazing. But, I look at everybody's lips, right? So I'm always kind of focused on, that for that comprehension value where people are like, what's happening? Cause I'm like, I'm like, I have this like very intent look and sometimes I don't realize I'm doing it, but I will, while they're talking, I will mouth what they're saying. And so they're just like, are you okay? I'm like, oh, absolutely. I'm okay. I'm just really involved in what you're saying right now.
This is engagement on the top level for me.
Yeah. It's like, and then people are like, are you, oh, I'm like, yeah, it's actually just the way that I'm ingesting what you're saying. It's so good. But again, they had to feel safe to ask me that question.
Mm-hmm.
What's happening right now with your like, are you okay? I'm like, yes, I am. And then I have to feel safe to be able to say, I am so involved in what you're saying that I don't even realize that I am just mirroring what you're saying. And that is building a relationship, right? That is building a trust, like you said. It is building this, what was the term that you called it now? Restorative culture.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's something about deciding that people can be seen as themselves from the beginning. Like that has to be a part of what we're valuing. Like, and be willing to confront our discomfort when we see people as themselves. Because you cannot include something that you haven't included within yourself. More than likely, you are shutting down aspects of you because it brings you discomfort because you don't want to let that be seen. So the more we practice letting ourselves be seen, and then the more we confront the discomfort we have when, first of all, when we show up and when other people show up, I'm like, what's this about? When my son did this, or, and I feel this kind of way, what's that about? And really being willing to do that interrogation and then like broadening our sense of what the us should look like, because we do have the us's. We all act the way we're supposed to act, and then we have the thems. They don't act the right way. When we can do this work and just broaden this sense of who's us, looking different, acting different, valuing different things, seeing the world in a different way, then we can make sensible choices. We're all not going to include everyone, but then at least choose what you're choosing, and just be like, I am choosing, versus having this creeping fungus of insidious like non-acceptance that just kind of shows up in all of our lives and in work and in life. So yeah,
I love all of that. Now do you have some things for us? I actually we got so into this. Normally I like to show things like this. We've been talking for an hour, and doesn't it feel like 5 minutes?
I think we were doing half an hour. I was like, I'm sure that we're on the half hour mark right now.
Nope, we've been going for an hour. I do want to, I will literally talk to you for like 6 hours about this. Like I love you and I love everything that you do and create in the world, but I do want people to make sure that they do come find you at faithclarke.com. But also that you said you'd like people to email you if you have questions, and it's faith@faithclarke.com. Now, Faith, I always like to kind of wrap up these things with things that I appreciate and love about the people that I talk to. So
can I just say one thing about what people could email me about?
Yeah.
When I am thinking about designing culture to do some of the stuff that we've talked about, I have 5 questions that I ask. When people tell me whether it's onboarding stuff or they're like, there's conflict or they need to figure out equity in salaries or whatever it is, I have 5 questions. So I am finally pulling those 5 questions together in a document. So if you want to be able to either assess your current culture or even assess your intentions towards culture design before you have, hired anybody, I have a thing, and I'd be happy to email it to you. And if you fill it in, then we could have a chat about it. And then you could come up with just the first place that your first question to target if you want to make sure restorative culture is your priority without having to choose between healthy humans and healthy profits. Like, this is such a false choice. This is not just, we don't have to do that. We actually can create cultures that make us do the things our business is supposed to do and nourish the humans while we're doing it. No choosing. So email me about that.
I love it.
Or whatever.
Okay. Now can I talk about the things I love about you?
Yes, I'm resisting the yes, do tell me those things. Let me just lean in.
So first of all, I love how you make sure your needs, you're like, no, actually, before we go into this, we're gonna talk about this. And I love that you do this. But you know what? Here's the thing. I love you more than consonants. I love you because you have this incredible ability to pause and survey what's happening, and not just the things that are like really obvious, but these little tiny things that we're missing, the little tiny things or that need to be recognized. And I say that things, but I mean people. You see people, you recognize people, you hear people, and you have this ability to really listen and make sure that their voices are heard. You don't speak for people, which I think is really important. And it is always a skill. You let them have their voice, you let them have their needs. All you do is you just make it possible, or you try to remove the barriers so that's possible within your own ability. And I think that is a powerful tool that we can all get better at. Sometimes we hear things from people and then we go, okay, we can speak for them now. We can tell other people because we've heard this one thing, but it really isn't necessary, because people have the ability to communicate their needs and to be able to do that. But it is an opportunity to clear barriers for people. Like you said, let's move the table. I'm going to move the table for you so that you can stop. I'm not going to tell you to move the table. I'm going to actually remove that table for you. And then we can work together. Like, what's a better place for the table to be for everybody in the room? But right now I'm going to just take the table away so that you can walk in a straight line. And I think that is the capacity to recognize that's in our ability to do in interpersonal relationships. You really highlight that. I loved that analogy that you brought out, but that's what you do in your life. And that's what you do in your relationships. When I've had, struggles, you've gone in and said, okay, I am going to fix it, but here's what I can fix it from here's what I can offer from my perspective, from my experience, from this. Now, what can we do together to build something for you to go? And that is powerful. That is allowing people to have full sovereignty and full, they're the navigator of their own experience. You've just been there to make it have some ease, to just make sure that they're supported and that they're nourished. So I love that about you. And I'm like, I will not ever stop talking about how great you are in the world, because I think more people should know about you and know your work that you're doing. So thank you for being here, and thank you for being like such an incredible force in my life and in the lives of others. I love seeing people are like, oh, I worked with Faith, or I got to talk to Faith on this. And I can't tell you how excited I am when that happens, because I'm like, ooh, they got the Faith Clarke experience. Like, they got that. They were able to experience you in that. And I think that's probably one of the greatest gifts in the world.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. I so appreciate your looking at me and seeing me. I appreciate that so much. Thank you.
I love it. So we will have more conversations about this, because we have more things to discuss. I want to have you back either on this podcast or another podcast talking about why working in a corporation or in a business is okay. Because I think we sometimes, especially when we talk about breaking down capitalism or deconstructing capitalism, it's this whole, we kind of focus on like employee owned or whatever, and it doesn't always work. And I think I want to have this conversation with you, especially how to create more of this restorative culture aspect where we can work for other people and it's okay. And it's healthy and it's nourishing. And it's not all about, exhausting the labor, like you said, for the profits. So I'd love to have you back if you're interested in us focusing on that. I think it'd be a really great conversation.
any conversation you want us to have, I'm here. So
just, I still have this in my calendar, Clubhouse with Faith at 9 a.m. on Fridays. And I've never taken it out. And it's just like, why is that there? Because just in case Faith wants to have this moment with me, I'm ready. It's in my calendar anytime. Okay. But thank you so much for being here, Faith. I do appreciate you. If you do, so any organization, like you said, even if you haven't created a team yet, but you're starting to think about it, or you want to, we are employees still. When we're a single owner, creating the culture, creating the restorative culture is for you as well, not just for the team. And so Faith has options for both big and small businesses. If you're listening to this and you're part of a major corporation and you're part of a team, whether you're a leader or you're part of creating that culture, reach out to Faith. Talk to your business, the community that you have in your business, about bringing Faith in, because I will tell you, it will be an incredible opportunity for creating this restorative culture and creating these really healthy relationships, and starting to look at productivity in a different way, as opposed to just do, but actually doing things fully and creatively and like a wholesome approach. So do go find Faith Clarke at faithclarke.com. Faith, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having this conversation with me.